Nobody else was reading, so why should I? Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Real Reading Talk. I am your most gracious host, Miss Sasha. And with Real Reading Talk, I discuss the real systemic issues that are at the very core, the very foundation, as to why we have these high levels of illiteracy in our Black communities and the ways in which we can combat these issues together. Welcome. If this is your first time, thank you. I hope that you are gaining benefit. I hope that you enjoy the content. Shout out to my OGs, my old heads. I appreciate you rocking with me. Now we about to get right on to this conversation, y'all. Okay. Yes, so nobody else was reading, so why should I? This is the conversation that I was having with this young lady when our organization, ABC Read, was set up at a particular local event. We were giving out books, promoting reading like we always do, giving tips on the benefits of reading aloud, all the things, right, that we do within our organization. And so I was having a conversation with this lady who, by the way, she works at the library, one of the local libraries here. And so this is how it went, right? So I got some notes here, okay? So she said, she was like, honestly, she said when she was younger, her parents insisted that she was reading. In fact, they even enrolled her in a reading program, okay? She said that books were all around her. So she grew up in a print-rich environment. Parents had her in a reading program. They insisted that she read, okay? However, what she began to notice, no one else in the house was reading like her. Her siblings weren't reading. I even asked her, I said, how about your parents? Because I'm thinking naturally, I said, okay, her parents, I'm quite sure she had to have been seeing them read. She said no. She said they were working. So they were constantly working, trying to take care of the family. They weren't reading. So as she got older, she began to process. She realized that she had developed an adverse reaction to reading. She said she believed she went through this rebellious period when it came to reading. And she didn't begin to process that until actually she got older and she realized that. She said now she says she's reading now. She's good now, but she said she went through a period where she was like, I'm not even trying to read. I'm straight. What was the reason? Well, she was like, nobody else was being made to read. Nobody else was reading. Reading was not being modeled in her home. So she was like, and from a common sense perspective, why should I? And I was like, I said, this right here. I said, oh, yeah. I said, this is what I must address in my podcast, Real Reading Talk. Those of you who have been rocking with me, y'all already know what time it is. How many times do I talk about how we as a community, us as adults, parents, caregivers, grandmas, aunties, uncles, older people in the community, we have to model and show that reading is important, that it is valued. If we don't do that, the young folks, the children, they are going to, from a common sense perspective, doing the math, they're like, okay, you ain't doing it, but you're telling me that is good for me and I need to do it. You're insisting upon it, but why aren't you? Because as we know, right, about 75%, probably even more of what our children learn is from what they see us doing, not what we're telling them to do. And if we're not modeling that, if we're not showing that as an example, then they are not going to follow. Now, you may have some kids, because I'm going to tell you, And I've talked about this before in one of my episodes. My youngest sister, she actually was the reader in our household. So when I would go over to my dad's house, I have four sisters. And when I would go over to my dad's house, my youngest sister, when she wanted to like be by herself. She wasn't trying to be gathering around the television like how we would do as a family. She would just retreat, go back to her room, and she would go read on her own. She didn't see her mother doing that. She didn't see our father doing that. The only thing I remember seeing my father read pretty regularly was through the newspaper. But in terms of like seeing, him read or seeing other people in the house, like just curling up with books or us discussing books, even for that fact, it wasn't like we had like a bookshelf or whatever with books and all of that. We wasn't getting read aloud to. But my sister, that was a habit that she actually developed on her own. So you can have situations like that. As we know, somebody can literally grow up one way in a house, seeing people do something, but then they actually decide to do the opposite. But the likelihood of a child growing up doing something that they see in their household is going to be the greater thing happening of them actually doing that. They're going to be doing that thing that they see the most of. And that's why this young lady that I had a conversation with, it made sense. It made total sense. And she was like, she had processed. She was like, dang, man, because when I got to probing and asking those questions, I said, so, I'm like, wow, man, you was in a reading program? Like, okay. And they had the books all around you. They were like, you got to read and all that whoop de whoop. And I'm like, okay, was your parents reading? And then she was like, no. She said they were working. And I'm like, bingo, bingo. Hey, y'all, listen, it's not rocket science. It's not a big math figure that we have to solve. It's as simple as us doing the thing that we say is important. Period. When we are being consistent with not only taking our children to the libraries, when we have different programs in the communities, like, for example, with ABC Read, with our organization, we have what we like to call reading experiences that are free, by the way. These are free that we give. I'm talking about replete with books that represent our people, not just any old books that I'm like, okay, getting rando books and all that type of stuff. And I'm like, here. No, I'm intentional about the books that I'm giving to the community because I know we need help in all areas of our lives: finances, mindset, our health, entrepreneurship, all of these different things. These are the kinds of books that I'm getting for the community. I'm talking about literacy activities, speakers, hands-on activities, games, food, all of this stuff. And literally it's almost like you have to like beg somebody and please come to this free event where you can have all of these different things that you need in the community. So when you have things like that, and then we're also, again, you're taking your kids to the library, doing all those things should be done consistently. And one of the main things that must be done, though, that child is looking at, they're looking at us as the adults, as the caregivers, as the parents, as the mentors. When they see us modeling how reading is important, whether we're reading a physical copy or whether we're listening to a book on Audible or some type of audio device, when they see that, it's going to go into their subconscious. They eventually, even if they, may not be reading as much as they get older, because, we understand that can happen, especially with teenagers, right? You're getting older, you're doing more things with your friends. You may have a job, you may be preparing to go to college, whatever. But still, it's going to stick with them because they saw you modeling it. They saw you doing the thing. So this episode was just going to be straight and short to the point. And again, just because I've said it before, it's there is value and there is a necessity in being repetitive in your messaging. That's why we see commercials the same one over and over and over again. That's why when you're listening to whatever it is that you're listening to, and them same ads come on over and over again, that you can literally repeat. It could be something that you're not even thinking about. That's not even on your radar. It's not something you're interested in. But when that commercial come on, you can say it verbatim. Why is that? That's called proper propaganda. Like the brother Louis Michaud talked about. Okay, he was that brother who started that first black bookstore in Harlem. It's a such thing as having proper propaganda. Ain't nothing wrong with it if it's for good. So if somebody is constantly repeating a message to you and they're telling you, okay, this is what you should be doing. This is what you should be doing. And yes, this is what you should be doing. That's good. But we also have to make sure our messaging is in our actions. Our kids need to see us consistently valuing reading. This is why I am purposeful and I am intent with what? I got the bookshelf, got the books, got the merch. Reading is freedom. I'm also an author now. I co-authored this book with 9 other remarkable women. Because again, I am dedicated to this literacy space. I'm tired of seeing these ugly statistics where you have communities here in Cleveland. You got some neighborhoods, 80% of our communities that are predominantly Black, where they are functionally illiterate or they're not even literate at all. They're barely getting past a 4th grade, 5th grade reading level. Or you have our kids, or we going to communities and having conversations with adults, and we're trying to give books. Like the one event I just was at last week, and we had the book display. The lady was standing by, and I said, "Would you like to get a book?" She was like, "No." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I said, and I had to tell her, I said, "They're not. I'm not trying to sell you a book." No. I'm like, "Oh, okay." Again, my thinking is this: even if you may see a book that is not of your interest, okay? And typically what I like to do, that's why I love engaging and talking to the community. I'll ask them, I say, "Well, what kind of books do you like?" That's how a lot of the books that we do get, because we have conversations with people. When folks are saying, "Oh, do you got that book?" Like it's this one author, Donald Goins. I wasn't familiar with him, but apparently a lot of my old school folks, they grew up, reading his fiction type books. Like I think he's like kind of, somebody who writes for like quote unquote like street life. All right. I never read his books, but it sounds like it's probably a little risque, a little raunchy, whatever. However, you got some of our folks, that's what they into. And they like, "Hey, you got some?" I'm like, "No, but I'll get some of those books." Or you have folks who are like some of my young brothers at the one school said, "You got comic books?" Okay, I'll get some more comic books. We had a few, but now I know I'm gonna get some more because you're asking for it. Even if there's a book there that you are not interested in, let's have a conversation. Let me know what kind of books you want to read. Or even what you can do, say, "I'm going to take the book." And in the back of your mind, say, "You know what? So and so likes these kinds of books. I'm going to go ahead and give that to him, or I'm going to give that to my little niece. I know that she loves learning about building. So I'm going to get this book that talks about architecture or something like that." That's how we have to start thinking. Because we're not going to do away with this issue of illiteracy and even illiteracy. If we just continuously look at reading like, I'll do it when I get time, I get a chance, or the mindset, I'm gonna make sure my child knows how to read, I'm gonna make sure they're reading, but then you're not doing it. Because what's gonna happen is what I started off the podcast with. You're gonna have a situation just like that young lady said. She was like, man, she was rebellious when it got to a certain point when it came to reading. She like, bump that. She like, read for what? Ain't nobody else around me reading. Why do I gotta be the one? If it's so good, then how come ain't nobody else doing it? So, hey, y'all, we gotta do better. We have to be intentional and purposeful when it comes to doing better, period. So I hope you gain much benefit from this episode. Like I said, I wanted to keep it short, straight, sweet, to the point, concise, made the points, drove it home, bam. Okay, I ain't got to keep beating, as they say, beating on a dead horse. All right, you already know what it is. So I thank you all again for listening to another episode of Real Reading Talk. And I am your most gracious host, Miss Sation, with Real Reading Talk. Again, I discuss the real systemic issues at the very core, the very foundation as to why we have these high levels of illiteracy in our Black communities and the ways in which we can combat these issues together. And remember, y'all, reading is freedom. Peace. Hi, everybody. So it's time for that housekeeping. So as you all know, I am a pre-K through fourth grade reading tutor, and my tutoring business is called ABC Learn Tutoring. Go to abclearntutoring.com if your child is in need of some reading support. I'm also a certified Orton Gillingham dyslexia tutor as well. So if your child has been diagnosed with dyslexia or dysgraphia and needs that extra reading support, please make sure that you reach out to me by going to abclearntutoring.com today. Also, I'm the founder and executive director of ABC Read, the nonprofit organization that I started over 10 years ago. And we have been in this community in Cleveland, giving out books, reading programs, healthy snacks, literacy workshops as well, and book clubs, okay? So we are all the things literacy. Go to abcread.org. Make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Reading is Freedom. Make sure you like it. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure you put comments too, okay? I want that engagement, that feedback. So make sure you do that. I appreciate you tremendously. Also go to my website, readingisfreedomshop.com. Grab your merch, grab your shirts, grab your mugs, grab your bags. Do that. All right, wear it proudly, okay? Showing that, yes, we promote reading, all right? We are out here pushing back against illiteracy and illiteracy. And my book, y'all, Her, Healed, Empowered, Resilient. Yes, I've co-authored this book with my 9 other phenomenal authors, okay? And so make sure that you grab your copy of Her today on Amazon, all right? And for my Cleveland folks, I have copies that you can actually get from me personally, all right? So just, you can actually just reach out to me via my website, abclearntutoring.com, all right? The book that I finished reading was by Philip Wheaton. I talked about that last week. And the book that I've been currently reading, I actually went back into my fictional side. So I've been reading Sister Soldier's book, Midnight, all right? I know she has a couple, I can't remember which Midnight, but I think it's the second one, the second Midnight. So yeah, I highly recommend you guys check out Sister Soldier's line of books, okay? And I'm just gonna end with, again, reading is not optional, y'all. Reading is a necessity. Reading is freedom, okay? So remember that. I thank you all again for listening to another episode of Real Reading Talk. I am your most gracious host, Miss Sasha, and with Real Reading Talk, I discuss the real systemic issues that are at the very core, the very foundation as to why we have these high levels of illiteracy in our communities and the ways in which we can combat these issues together. Thank you. And remember, please keep reading for at least 30 minutes a day. Peace.